go into the woods at night, but when you're 16, you don't listen. Deep in the trees, I found a clearing, perfectly round, where nothing grew. In the center was a stone well, even though there was no house nearby. As I stepped closer, I heard whispers, dozens of voices calling my name, begging me to come closer. I ran. I think I made it out, but sometimes, in dreams, I still hear them calling. Next story. My cousin and I used to explore abandoned buildings. One day, we found an old factory on the edge of town, half collapsed. Inside was a wall covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all of people sleeping. Some even showed rooms that looked eerily like ours. We left in a panic, but that night, pinned to my window, was a fresh photo. Me, sleeping in my bed. Next story. The old woman who lived next door passed away, and I was tasked with helping clean out her house. In the attic, I found a trunk filled with letters. Love letters, it seemed, addressed to different men. But as I read further, the tone shifted. Desperation, anger, obsession. Each man eventually disappeared, according to the notes. At the very bottom was a final letter, newer than the rest. It is addressed to me. Next story, I joined a ghost tour as a joke. The guide led us to a crumbling cemetery on the outskirts of town. As he told stories, I felt something icy grip my wrist. I spun around, nothing. But the cold stayed with me, a deep chill. That night, at home, I found a dusty handprint on my bathroom mirror, and a second one beside it, waiting. Next story. One evening, walking home, I noticed a man standing under a street lamp, watching me. He didn't move, didn't speak. Every night after that, he was there. Same spot, same blank stare. One night, I got fed up and approached him, only to find a tattered poster taped to the lamppost. Missing, "Have you seen this man?" It was his face staring back at me. Next story. While volunteering at an animal shelter, I found a strange cat, pure black, with piercing green eyes. She chose me instantly, following me everywhere. At home, things started to change. Mirrors cracking on their own, shadows moving, and every night, the cat sat at the foot of my bed, staring at me as if waiting for something. I started dreaming of fires and screams, dreams I couldn't wake from. But the cat never blinked, never left. Next story. My little brother told me about the man in the closet. We thought it was just childhood imagination, until the night we heard it too. Scraping, whispering, low laughter. When we opened the closet, there was nothing but an old cracked mirror we had never seen before. We threw it away the next day, but at night, we still hear knocking. And sometimes, when the lights are off, we catch glimpses of a tall, grinning figure standing just out of sight. Next story. I bought an old music box from a flea market. The vendor said it was special. Every night, it played by itself at exactly midnight. I locked it away, but still the tune echoed through the house. Then I started finding notes, scrawled on my walls in a child's handwriting. Play with me. I don't even own a pen that color. Next, there's a trail through the woods that everyone avoids after dark. I ignored the warnings. Halfway through, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate. When I turned, there was no one there, but the footprints appeared in the mud, fresh, following me step by step. I ran all the way home, but when I reached my porch, there were muddy footprints already waiting at the door. Next, my friend gifted me an old book of fairy tales. Only the stories weren't like any I knew. They were darker, twisted. Every story ended badly. Then, things from the tales started happening. Strange knocks at my window, shadows creeping closer when I slept. One night, the final page appeared. A new story. My name was in the title, and it hadn't ended yet. Next, I was at a carnival when I found the fortune teller's tent. She seemed ordinary enough until she grabbed my hand, her eyes going wide. She whispered, "He's coming for you." I laughed it off. But when I left the tent, I noticed a man watching me from the Ferris wheel. Every night since, I've seen him in the corner of my eye, getting closer. Next, there's an old abandoned subway tunnel beneath the city. Urban explorers love it. I went once, just once. Halfway in, my flashlight died. In the darkness, I heard footsteps, too many footsteps. Then whispers. I ran blind, scraped my hands and knees until I finally found the exit. When I looked back, the dark mouth of the tunnel seemed to pulse like a living thing. I never went back. Next story. After moving into a new apartment, I noticed a strange crack in the wall. It looked like a handprint, pressed outward. I covered it up with paint. The next day, it was back, larger, deeper. I moved out when the handprints spread across the entire bedroom wall, clawing, pressing, trying to break through. I found a diary hidden beneath a loose floorboard in my bedroom. The entries were chilling. Dreams of drowning, waking up soaked in sweat, visions of someone standing at the foot of the bed. I laughed it off until I had the same dream. I woke up gasping, the taste of salt water in my mouth and muddy footprints leading from my bed to the open window. Next story. While driving down a deserted highway, my radio cut out. Every station was static, except one. A deep, distorted voice kept repeating my name. I shut off the radio, but the voice didn't stop. It was coming from the back seat. When I turned around, there was no one there, but the seat was wet, as if someone had just been sitting there. Next story. My neighbor always kept his curtains drawn. One night, I saw them pulled back. Inside was a dark room, and someone staring out, motionless. I waved, feeling awkward. The next morning, I learned he had died 2 weeks ago. But every night since, that same figure stands behind the window, watching silently. Next story. When my family moved into our new house, my little sister made an imaginary friend almost immediately. She said her friend's name was Lucy, and that she lived in the walls. We thought it was cute, until Lucy started leaving messages for us. Scratched into the wood, written on the mirrors, whispered from the vents. She's mine now. Next story. The old mirror had been in the house longer than anyone could remember. It sat in the attic, covered in a sheet, forgotten. One day, I uncovered it. In its reflection, I didn't see the dusty attic. I saw a lush garden, full of whispering voices and shadowy figures. They smiled and beckoned me forward. When I touched the glass, it rippled like water, and something cold and slimy brushed my fingers from the other side. Next story. There was a door at the end of the basement, a door we didn't know existed. My father swore it hadn't been there before. When we opened it, we found a tiny windowless room. Inside was a single chair and a dusty journal filled with dates. Dates that matched disappearances in our town. The last entry, tomorrow's date, and beneath it, scrawled hastily, was my name. Next story. During a summer road trip, we stopped in a nearly abandoned town. Dusty, quiet, almost frozen in time. We found a diner still open and decided to eat. The food was fine, but the people were strange, all too still, too silent. As we drove away, my friend looked in the rearview mirror and gasped. The entire town was standing in the road behind us, unmoving, watching us drive into the night. Next story. In my childhood home, there was a room we weren't allowed to enter. My parents said it was storage, but at night, I heard crying from inside. On my 18th birthday, when they were out, I picked the lock. Inside was a crib, long abandoned, and a faded picture of a baby. Behind it, carved into the wall, was a message: "Don't let me out." Next story. I took a job at a remote research station in the Arctic. It was isolated, lonely. One night, the radio crackled to life, a voice whispering in static, "Don't open the door." Moments later, someone knocked, soft, polite. Looking out, I saw a figure wearing my face, smiling wide and wrong. There's a stretch of highway just outside my town called Devil's Smile. Everyone's heard the stories. People vanishing, strange lights, phantom hitchhikers. I always thought it was nonsense until I drove it. It was late, past midnight. I was coming home from a party half drunk and too stubborn to take the long way. I turned onto Devil's Mile, radio blasting, windows down. Halfway through, the signal cut. Silence. No static. Just dead air. Then the headlights started flickering. My engine sputtered. I pulled over, swearing, banging the wheel. That's when I saw her. A girl, maybe 16, standing on the side of the road. Pale, barefoot, long black hair covering her face. She was holding a teddy bear, soaking wet, like she'd just crawled out of a lake. She looked up at me. Her eyes were solid black. I floored it. The road stretched longer than it should have. Every mile felt like 10. No exits, no signs. And behind me, always behind me, headlights. But every time I looked, they vanished. When I finally burst out the other side, it was nearly dawn. My phone had 30 missed calls, all from unknown. My car, covered in wet handprints, on the hood, the windows, the roof, and in the back seat, soaked teddy bear. I don't remember stopping. I burned it that night. But sometimes, when I drive alone, my phone rings at 3:33 a.m. I don't answer anymore. Next story. My dad's job took us all over the country. He was a structural engineer, mostly bridges, tunnels, and old buildings. But one place stuck with me: Raven Hill Asylum. It had been abandoned for decades. He was hired to assess it for demolition. I tagged along because I was 16 and bored. Big mistake. The place was wrong the second we walked in. The air felt heavy. The walls were stained, the lights didn't work, and even the dust smelled off. But deeper inside, the silence was crushing. Then we found the children's wing, doors painted with fading animals, cribs still bolted to the floors. My dad said the wing had been shut down early before the rest. "Too many incidents," he muttered. I wandered into a room with a cracked mirror. My reflection blinked, but I didn't. I ran back to Dad. He didn't believe me. Then we heard it. Laughter, high-pitched, dozens of voices. We turned. The hallway behind us had changed. It was longer. The windows were gone, and the laughter got closer. We ran. The exit was gone. We kept turning corners, finding the same rooms over and over. Eventually, Dad found a rusted fire escape door and kicked it open. We tumbled outside, gasping. Back at the hotel, we checked his phone. He'd recorded video inside. The footage was mostly static, but in every frame, just behind us, there were faces in the dark. Dozens, watching. He quit that job the next day. Next story. When I was 7, I had an imaginary friend named Charlie. He was funny, kind, always knew what I was thinking. My parents thought it was cute, until I told them Charlie lived in the mirror. They took the bathroom mirror down, hid it in the attic. That night, I found a new one in my closet. It hadn't been there before. Charlie was waiting inside, smiling. He told me secrets, told me where Dad kept the Christmas presents, told me about the neighbor's dog before it went missing. told me how my mom would die. A week later, she got in a car crash. No one could explain why she swerved into oncoming traffic. But Charlie just said, "Told you so." After that, I stopped talking to him. But Charlie didn't stop talking to me. I'd see him in spoons, sunglasses, storefront glass, smiling, waiting. When I was 12, I covered every mirror in the house. It helped, for a while. Then I started seeing my reflection move when I didn't, blinking twice, tilting its head, grinning. One night, I woke up to find all the mirrors in the house uncovered, every single one. And in each one, Charlie stood behind me. He whispered, "You're not the only one who grew up." Now I sleep in the dark, no glass, no screens. But every morning, something leaves messages on my bathroom mirror. Let me out. One day. I think I will. Отлично. Вот еще 3 длинные истории в нужном тебе формате. 11 Labs формат. 3500 символов. Без финальных фраз, без лишнего оформления. Начинаю с next story. Next story. My grandmother warned me never to answer the phone after 2 a.m. She said, spirits borrow voices at that hour. Last night my phone rang at 2:17. Caller ID said mom. I answered groggily. She said, "Honey, come outside." I'm home. My mom died 3 years ago, and her voice is still whispering through the phone, begging me to open the door. Next story, I always leave a bowl of water out for my cat before bed. But lately, every morning, it's bone dry and covered in tiny handprints. Not paw prints, handprints. I set up a camera. At 3:12 a.m., a shadow crawled into the kitchen. Tall, thin, jerkily moving. It drank from the bowl, then turned toward the camera. Its eyes were exactly like my cat's. It started like any other evening. I got home late from work, tossed my keys into the bowl by the door, and collapsed onto the couch. I don't even remember falling asleep. But something woke me around 2 a.m. It wasn't a noise, not exactly. More like a pressure in the air, like the whole apartment was holding its breath. Groggy, I sat up. The TV was off. No lights were on. But the hallway leading to my bedroom seemed wrong. It looked longer somehow, stretched, distorted. I blinked a few times, thinking maybe I was just dreaming. Then I saw him, a figure, standing at the end of the hallway, half shrouded in darkness, tall, thin, wearing something that looked almost like an old-fashioned suit. I couldn't make out his face, just a outline. And he was still. So still, it made my skin crawl. I told myself to get up, turn on a light, do something. But my body wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, heart hammering. He didn't walk toward me. He glided, silent, smooth, like the hallway was pulling him closer. And when he was just a few feet away, I realized his face wasn't a face. It was just a smooth, blank surface. No eyes, no mouth. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to go away. When I opened them, everything was normal again. The hallway was its usual length. No one was there. Just the faint hum of my fridge in the kitchen. I didn't sleep that night, and I haven't stayed in that apartment since. Next story. The first package arrived on a Tuesday morning. No return address, just a plain brown box sitting on my doorstep. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a single Polaroid photo, a picture of me, taken from behind as I stood in my kitchen the night before. At first, I laughed it off. Maybe one of my friends was playing a prank. But the next day, another package, another photo. This time, me sitting on the couch, staring at my phone, totally unaware. I changed the locks. I installed cameras. I kept the blinds closed at all hours. It didn't matter. Every morning, a new photo would arrive, showing me the day before. eating dinner, brushing my teeth, sleeping. Always taken from impossible angles. Sometimes from outside, sometimes from inside the house. The final photo wasn't of me. It was of my front door, open, and someone, or something, standing in the doorway. I moved out that night. Next story. They say if you dream of the same place 3 nights in a row, you should never go there. I didn't know that at the time. For 3 nights straight, I dreamed of a crumbling amusement park, rusty rides creaking in the wind, the faded smell of popcorn in the air. In the dream, I always stood in front of the Ferris wheel, staring up at its skeletal frame. On the 4th night, I got a call from an old college friend. She was back in town and wanted to meet at the old abandoned fairgrounds outside the city. She thought it would be spooky fun. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to say no, but I didn't want to seem crazy, so I agreed. When we got there, the place looked exactly like my dream. Same broken rides, same rotting ticket booths, same Ferris wheel looming against the night sky. Half joking, we dared each other to get closer. That's when I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, just standing among the rides, pale, motionless, watching us. I grabbed my friend's arm and ran, not stopping until we were miles away. She still thinks it was just our imagination. I know better. Next story. When the old radio arrived in the mail, I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't ordered anything like that. It was dusty and ancient, with cracked dials and faded lettering. No sender information, no instructions. Just a small handwritten note tucked into the packaging. Only tune to 101.7. Curious and a little creeped out, I plugged it in. It took a minute for the static to clear. Then a voice, low and distorted, filled the room. It wasn't music. It wasn't a broadcast. It was someone whispering my name. I yanked the plug from the wall. Silence. But that night, the radio turned itself back on. No power, no batteries, but there it was, whispering again. Not just my name this time. Full sentences. Don't go outside. They're watching you. Stay still. I didn't listen. I ran to the front door and saw a figure standing just beyond the porch light. Too tall, too still. I slammed the door shut and stayed huddled in the living room until sunrise. When I finally worked up the courage to check, the radio was gone. Next story. On vacation, I rented a cheap motel room off the highway. Exhausted, I collapsed into bed without checking the place too carefully. Around 3 a.m., I woke to someone whispering my name. Heart racing, I turned on the light. No one there. But when I looked in the mirror, my reflection was smiling, even though I wasn't. Next story. When I was a kid, I had an imaginary friend named Charlie. He lived under my bed, and we would talk at night. As I grew up, I forgot about him. Years later, when I moved into my own apartment, I started hearing faint whispers under my bed again. At first, I blamed it on stress, but one night, I dropped my phone and had to reach underneath. And something cold, small, and childlike grabbed my hand. A familiar voice giggled, "Miss me." Next story. At a flea market, I bought an old VHS tape labeled home video. Curious, I found a player and popped it in. It showed a happy family at a picnic. Until the camera zoomed in on a dark figure standing at the tree line, closer in every shot. By the end, the screen turned black except for a whisper. "Now you're next." That night, I heard knocking on my window. even though I lived on the 6th floor. Next story. My phone buzzed with a new app I didn't remember downloading. See Who Watches You. Out of curiosity, I opened it. The camera turned on, showing my living room. Empty. But when I pointed it at the mirror, a hunched, grinning figure appeared behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But the app kept buzzing, showing the figure getting closer, frame by frame, every time I blinked. Next story, I volunteered to participate in a sleep study. The doctors said they'd monitor my brainwaves overnight. But when I woke up, the room was empty. No doctors, no nurses, just a recording playing on a loop. Thank you for your sacrifice. I stumbled into the hallway, only to find hundreds of empty beds and doors leading nowhere. Somewhere in the distance, something was moving. Something that had been watching us all along. Next story. After my grandfather died, we inherited his old farmhouse. While cleaning it out, we found a room we'd never noticed before. It was filled with hundreds of clocks, all ticking in perfect sync. But at exactly midnight, they all stopped at once. And in the silence that followed, a whisper echoed through the house. Time's up. Next story. While hiking alone in the woods, I found an old wooden cabin. Its door swung open at my touch. Inside, the walls were covered in photographs, all of me, taken without my knowledge, at different times and places throughout my life. Some from childhood, some from just days ago. In the center of the room sat a chair facing the door, still warm to the touch. Next story, I started receiving postcards from places I had never visited, all postmarked years in the past. Each card described events in my life before they happened. Birthday parties, new jobs, accidents. The last postcard arrived today. It simply read, "Goodbye." Next story. On a camping trip, I woke up to find my tent unzipped and my friend missing. Following footprints through the forest, I stumbled upon an old, overgrown well. At the bottom, I saw him, staring up at me, smiling unnaturally wide, whispering something I couldn't hear. Before I could react, more hands, small, pale hands, reached out from the darkness. Next story. Working late at the library, I discovered a hidden section of books with no titles. As I pulled one out, a note fell free. "Do not read aloud." Of course, I did. The lights flickered, the air grew icy, and I felt a presence brush past me. I fled, but even now, when I open a random book, sometimes I hear soft breathing just behind me. Waiting. Next story. On Halloween night, my friends and I found an old haunted house attraction deep in the woods. It seemed abandoned, but we dared each other to go in. Inside, mannequins dressed like our exact outfits stood silently, and written on the wall in dripping red paint, "You are already inside." The door slammed shut behind us. When we looked back at the mannequins, one was missing. Next story. It all began with a voice. I moved into an old apartment building last fall, lured by the low rent and the charm of its creaky wooden floors. The neighbors were few and kept to themselves. On my third night, just as I drifted into sleep, I heard a faint whisper coming from the heating vent. "Help me." I shot out of bed, heart hammering. I told myself it was the pipes. Old buildings always had strange noises. But the next night, it spoke again. My name this time. I shoved a chair against the vent, but it didn't stop. Every night, a little louder, a little closer. Then one night, I answered. And now, something waits for me behind the walls. It's getting harder to pretend it's just my imagination. Every town has that one abandoned house kids dare each other to enter. Ours was the old Watterson place. I went inside once on a dare. Creaky floors, moldy smell, the works. But in the attic, I found a chair facing the corner and a tape recorder on the floor. Pressed play. A voice whispered, "Turn around." I didn't. I ran. Years later, I drove past and saw a figure in the attic window, still sitting in the chair, watching. Next story. When I moved into my new apartment, the previous tenant left behind an old clock. It didn't work. Hands frozen at 3:33 a.m. I thought it looked cool, so I kept it. A week later, I started waking up at exactly 3:33 every night. Heart pounding, drenched in sweat. The clock, even unplugged, ticked loudly. One night, half asleep, I saw a shadow standing at the foot of my bed, pointing at the clock. I moved out 2 days later, leaving everything behind, except the clock, which somehow ended up packed with my things. Next story. There's a stretch of highway near my town where accidents happen more than anywhere else. Locals say it's cursed. I didn't believe it until I drove it one night alone. Thick fog rolled in and figures appeared by the roadside, waving frantically. When I stopped, they vanished. A whisper filled the car. "Keep going." As I sped off, I saw it, a twisted wreck of a car, just like mine, headlights shattered, an exact mirror image. When I looked in my rearview mirror, the figures were running after me. Next story. The abandoned hospital outside town was a magnet for thrill seekers. My friends and I dared each other to spend a night there. Inside, graffiti covered the walls. Beds were rusted, and the smell of rot filled the air. We laughed until we heard it, soft sobbing echoing through the halls. We followed it, thinking it was a prank. Instead, we found a wheelchair rolling slowly down the hallway, empty, except for bloody handprints smeared across the seat. Next story. When my dog started barking at the basement door every night, I thought it was just animals down there. But one night, the barking turned into whimpering. When I opened the door, my dog bolted upstairs. I went down with a flashlight. Halfway down, I felt a cold hand wrap around my ankle. I fell, shining the light around. No one there. On the wall, scratched deep into the stone, was one word: stay. Next story. At a flea market, I bought an old Polaroid camera. I loved the vintage feel, but when I developed the first batch of photos, I noticed something strange. In every picture, a dark figure loomed behind me, getting closer with each snap. I stopped using it, locked it away. Weeks later, I woke up to find fresh Polaroids scattered across my bed. New pictures taken while I slept. In the last photo, the figure was standing right beside my bed. Next story. My sister used to have an imaginary friend named Tommy. She'd talk to him, play with him. We thought it was harmless. But one day, she told my mom that Tommy didn't want her to live with us anymore. That night, we woke to her screaming. Her room was trashed, toys smashed, curtains torn down. She had scratches down her arms. After that, she never spoke of Tommy again. Years later, while remodeling, we found a name carved into the wall behind her bed. Tommy. Next story. While camping deep in the woods, my friends and I stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. Old tents, a cold fire pit, food still in cans. No one in sight. We joked that it felt like they vanished mid-meal. That night, strange noises surrounded us. Snapping branches, whispered voices. In the morning, we packed to leave, but found our gear shredded, claw marks everywhere. As we fled, I glanced back and saw a shadow. tall and lanky, standing exactly where our tents had been. Next story, a package arrived at my door with no return address, just a small, unmarked VHS tape. Curiosity got the best of me. I found an old player and watched it. Grainy footage showed my house, from the outside, from the inside, from the bedroom. Someone had been filming me for weeks. Panicked, I checked every inch of my home, found hidden cameras behind vents, inside light fixtures. I moved the next day, but sometimes I still get packages, blank, waiting. Next story. After my grandfather died, we inherited his farm. While clearing out his barn, I found a locked hatch in the floor. After hours of struggling, I got it open. Below was a cramped, dark room filled with old furniture and a mirror facing the hatch. As I leaned over, I saw movement, but not mine. Something in the reflection reached out, grasping for the opening. I slammed it shut. But that night, I heard banging from under the floorboards, louder and louder until dawn. I used to play hide and seek with my little brother. He was terrible at hiding. I'd always find him within seconds, behind the curtains, under the bed, in the closet. One day, I couldn't find him. I checked all the usual places, called his name. Nothing. Then I heard a whisper from inside the laundry hamper. "Don't open it. That's not me." I froze, because I'd already seen his shoes sticking out from under the couch. Next story, I found a phone on the sidewalk during my walk home. It was old, cracked, no case, but it still had power. Curious, I opened the photo gallery. There were only 2 pictures. The first was of my house. The second was of me, standing outside my bedroom window, taken last night. I dropped the phone. It buzzed in my hand. New message, turn around. Next story, I tucked my daughter in, kissed her forehead, and turned off the light. "Daddy, there's someone under my bed," she whispered. I knelt down and looked underneath. She was there, eyes wide, trembling. "Daddy," she said, "there's someone on my bed." Next story. Every morning, I hear knocking on my front door at exactly 3:33 a.m. When I open it, no one's there. I finally set up a camera. The footage showed me opening the door to myself, only I never remembered doing it. Next story, I got a call from my mom while at work. She asked why I didn't answer the door. Confused, I said, "I'm not home." She paused, then whispered, "But someone in your hoodie just walked in." Next story, I went to my grandpa's funeral. During the service, my phone vibrated with a message. "Help me. They're burying me." It was from his number. Next story, my roommate was snoring loudly all night. Annoyed, I got up to shake him awake, but he wasn't home. I was alone, and the snoring was coming from inside my closet. Next story, it started with a strange smell in my apartment. Not bad, just off, metallic, like pennies and soil. I thought it was the pipes, or maybe something rotting under the fridge, but nothing explained it. Then the photos on my walls began to tilt. At first, just a little. I'd fix them, and the next day, they'd be crooked again. Then more crooked, then upside down. My dog stopped sleeping in the living room. He'd bark at the air, hackles raised, teeth bared, at an empty corner. One night, I was woken up by the sound of whispering, dozens of voices, right outside my bedroom door. I opened it, but there was nothing there, until I turned around and saw my hallway mirror. Someone had written across it in the fog, "We live here too." Next story, I inherited an old clock from my grandfather. Big, antique, the kind with heavy ticking, and a chime that rings every hour. The strange thing was, it never kept the right time. No matter how often I reset it, it always drifted, always slower than it should be. But the real problem started when it began ticking backwards. Every night, I'd wake up and hear the slow, deliberate tick, 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 reversing time. One night, I watched the minute hand crawl backward across midnight. Then I blinked, and it was 11:57 again. I lost 3 minutes. The next night, it happened again. But this time, I lost an hour. I tried smashing the clock. It didn't break. I threw it out. But it reappeared on my shelf the next day, ticking. Only now, it was ticking faster, backwards. Next story, I was driving home after a long shift. The roads were empty, the radio low, and I was trying not to fall asleep at the wheel. Then I saw him, a man standing in the middle of the road. I hit the brakes, heart pounding, but when the car stopped, he was gone. Shaking, I kept driving. 10 minutes later, I saw him again. Same man, same spot, just staring. Only now, he was smiling. I didn't stop this time. I flew past him, eyes forward, trying not to look. But I glanced in the rearview mirror, and he was in the back seat. My sister used to talk to the man in the ceiling. She was 4. I thought it was just a weird phase, an imaginary friend she invented to cope with loneliness. But she was specific. He watches when I sleep, she said, and he doesn't like when people ignore him. I laughed it off, until one night I heard her scream. She was pointing at the vent above her bed, shaking. "There," she cried. "He's crawling." I checked. Nothing. But that night, I had a dream. The ceiling peeled away like skin, long fingers reaching down, pulling me toward a black void. When I woke up, my nails were full of drywall dust. And my sister, she stopped talking entirely. Next story, I keep my phone on silent at night, so I didn't hear it vibrate at 2:13 a.m. But in the morning, I saw the missed call from my own number. No voicemail, just the timestamp. Out of curiosity, I played back my security camera footage. At 2:13 a.m., someone stood outside my window, holding a phone to their ear. They looked just like me, only they were smiling, and I wasn't. Next story. There's a game kids play in my town. They call it the reflection game. You go into a dark room alone, hold a mirror in front of you, and whisper your own name 3 times. Then, you wait. It's supposed to be a joke, a dare, some urban legend passed down from older kids to scare the younger ones. But 3 months ago, a girl named Lily tried it at a sleepover. She screamed so loud, neighbors called the cops. They found her in the bathroom, mirror shattered, blood on her hands and arms. She wouldn't talk, not to her parents, not to the police. All she'd say was, smiled back. She hasn't been the same since. Last week, my brother said he was going to try it. He's 17, thinks everything's a joke. He went into the bathroom at 1 a.m. I waited outside, half expecting to hear laughter or maybe a scream. But it was silent. After 5 minutes, I knocked. No answer. I opened the door. He was standing in front of the mirror, staring. The lights were off, but the room was glowing. Diamond soys, unnatural. I called his name. He turned to look at me, but his reflection didn't. His reflection kept smiling. I slammed the door shut, dragged him out, and smashed the mirror with a chair. He didn't speak for hours. When he finally did, he whispered, "It's still there, watching." Now every mirror in the house is covered. But last night, I caught him trying to peel the sheet off the hallway mirror. He was smiling, just like his reflection had. Next story, I found a phone buried in the woods. It was half sunk in mud, screen cracked, battery barely alive. But when I turned it on, it lit up and immediately started playing a video. It was filmed right where I found the phone. The camera pointed at the trees, shaking slightly, like someone was running. You could hear breathing, fast, panicked, and then a voice whispered, "I see it." The footage cut out. Then another video autoplayed. This one showed a clearing. The phone was clearly placed on the ground, still recording. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, something stepped into view. I can't describe it. My brain doesn't want to. It was tall, wrong, like a shadow, trying to mimic a person, but getting the proportions all off. It just stood there, breathing, watching the camera. Then it lunged. The video cut to black. I looked through the rest of the phone. Dozens of videos, each one showing someone else. Always different people. Always in the same woods. Always ending the same way. I tried to leave, but I couldn't find the trail back. And now the phone keeps recording. On its own. I can't turn it off. It's in my pocket right now. And I think it's waiting for the next video. Next story. There's a town in the Midwest that doesn't appear on any GPS. You can't drive there intentionally. You only find it if you're lost. Really lost. Out of gas. Out of battery. And out of luck. Locals call it Hollow Point. The streets are quiet. Too quiet. No kids, no pets. Not even birds in the trees. But the houses look lived in. Lawns are trimmed. Porch lights glow. The people are kind. Too kind. They offer you food, shelter, help. But no one ever leaves, they say. You must be tired, they say. Rest now, they say. You're home. If you try to leave, your car won't start. The road loops back to town. The gas station always has one pump working. Just enough to get you lost again. Some say Hollow Point feeds off wanderers. Others say it's a refuge from something worse. But everyone agrees on one thing. Never spend the night in the yellow house on the hill. It's always empty, but the lights never go out. Next story. When I was a kid, my brother had an imaginary friend named Calvin. Calvin wore a brown suit. He never smiled. My brother said Calvin lived in the crawl space and only came out when our parents were asleep. We laughed it off until our dog refused to go near the hallway at night, until we started finding muddy footprints leading from the crawl space to my brother's room. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. My brother was sitting on the floor, talking to the dog. His voice was trembling. "I don't want to play anymore," he said. "You said you'd leave me alone." Then silence. And then something replied, not in words, just a long, raspy breath, like a wet exhale right next to my ear. We moved out a month later. I asked my brother about Calvin a few years ago. He just shook his head. "Calvin never left," he said. "He just found someone else to play with." Next story. I was brushing my teeth when I saw a man standing behind me in the mirror. I turned. Nothing. Heart racing, I looked back. Now he was closer. I blinked. Gone. I ran out of the bathroom and slammed the door, but the lights inside flicked on by themselves. And in the mirror, he was still standing there, smiling. I used to work the overnight shift at a gas station off a quiet highway. It was usually uneventful. A few truckers, the occasional lost tourist, maybe a teenager buying energy drinks at 2 a.m. But one night, a woman walked in, barefoot, pale, wearing a white nightgown soaked from the rain. She didn't say anything, just walked straight to the security monitors behind the counter and stared at them. I said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She didn't answer, just kept watching the screens. Then she whispered, "Where did he go?" I looked at the monitors. All of them showed the same thing, static, except one. Camera 3 showed a man in a suit, standing motionless in aisle 5. There was no one in aisle 5. I turned to check, empty. When I looked back at the monitor, the man had turned to face the camera, still not moving. I glanced at the woman. She was gone. The front door hadn't opened. I checked the whole store, empty. I replayed the footage the next morning. There was no woman, no man. But for 7 seconds, at exactly 3:13 a.m., every monitor flickered to show the same aisle, and a single word scratched across the screen in static: "Run." I used to work night security at a nursing home, mostly quiet. The halls dim, the residents asleep, the buzz of fluorescent lights keeping me company. But every night at 3:17 a.m., one of the call lights would go off. Always the same room, room 209. It had been empty for months. I'd reset the light. No one inside. Nothing disturbed. But like clockwork, 3:17, ding. Eventually, I asked the day staff about it. One nurse got pale and said, "That was Margaret's room." "Who's Margaret?" "She died in her sleep at 3:17 a.m. That night, when the light went off again, I didn't go in. But I swear I heard footsteps behind the door, and someone softly humming an old lullaby. My neighbor disappeared last winter. One day, he was shoveling snow from his driveway, and the next, gone. No goodbye, no moving van, just gone. The strange part, his house never changed. Lights still flickered at night. The smell of wood smoke drifted from his chimney. Packages still arrived on his porch, but were never taken inside. I got curious. One night, I crept up to his window and peeked in. Everything was exactly how he'd left it, except for the living room. In the center of the room was a single armchair, and in it sat my neighbor, but he wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. He was completely still, eyes wide open, as if staring at something behind me. I turned around. There was nothing there. When I looked back in, the chair was empty. Next story. We found the cabin during a weekend hike. Me, my brother, and 2 friends. It wasn't on the map, just a small crumbling structure in the middle of the woods. We dared each other to go in. We were stupid like that. Inside, it was dark and cold. Dust everywhere, except for one thing. A wooden table in the center of the room, and on that table, 4 dolls. They looked handmade, old, with button eyes and stitched mouths. But the worst part? Each one wore clothes that matched ours exactly. Same colors, same styles. Even the tiny necklace I was wearing. We left immediately, creeped out. That night, my brother was the first to vanish. The next night, one of our friends. On the 3rd night, I burned the doll that looked like me. And somehow, I'm still here. But sometimes, I hear tiny screams in the wind. Next story. When I was a kid, my grandfather warned me never to whistle at night. Bad things hear it, he said. Things that want to answer. I thought it was just one of those weird old man superstitions. Until the night I forgot and whistled as I walked home through the woods. Just once. A low, lazy tune. But something whistled back. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't a bird. It was the same tune, just slower and closer. I ran. I didn't stop until I was home. Doors locked, heart pounding. That night, I heard tapping on my bedroom window. I lived on the 2nd floor. I never whistled again. But sometimes, I still hear that tune outside my house, and it's always just a little off. Next story. The voicemail came at 2:43 a.m. It was my own voice, whispering, "Don't go to work tomorrow." I sat there staring at my phone, chills running through me. I hadn't made that call. I'd been asleep. I played it again. My voice, same tone, same rasp. "Don't go to work tomorrow." I called my boss, faked being sick, stayed home. At 9:12 a.m., the news broke. An explosion at the office, faulty wiring, half the building gone. I checked my call logs. There was no outgoing call that night, no voicemail on the server, just a blank space where the message had been. I don't know who warned me, or what version of me made the call, but I owed them my life. Next story. My daughter started drawing strange things, black scribbles, figures with hollow eyes, a shadow that hovered near her bed. She's 5. When I asked her about it, she said, "That's my friend. He helps me when you're asleep." "Where did you meet him?" "In the mirror." I checked her room. The mirror on her closet door was covered in tiny handprints. Too big to be hers. Too many fingers. I moved her to another room. That night, I dreamt of standing in her old room, looking into the mirror, and seeing myself blink, half a second too late. The next morning, the mirror was cracked, and on it, written in condensation, were the words, "Bring her back." Next story. The forest behind my house was always quiet, too quiet. Birds never sang. Animals never wandered through. Even the wind seemed to avoid it. As a kid, I was told to stay out. The woods don't want you, my grandmother used to say. But one day, I went in anyway. I was 12. Curious. Tired of the warnings. The deeper I walked, the colder it got. Then, I found it. A perfect circle of stones, blackened like they'd been burned. And in the center, a tree unlike any I'd ever seen. Twisted. Bark like charcoal. And eyes. Eyes in the wood following me. I ran. Years later, the forest is still there. Still silent. But now, when I walk past, the tree is closer to the edge than before. I never liked hospitals. Too sterile, too cold, too full of things people don't talk about. When my grandfather got sick, I had to visit him every day. Room 409, 4th floor, end of the hall. The place was always too quiet, like the walls were holding their breath. Grandpa kept saying the nurses weren't real, that they weren't there to help him. I thought it was dementia. Then I saw her. A nurse. Pale skin, uniform too clean, movements too smooth, like a marionette without strings. She never spoke, just stood outside Grandpa's door, watching. One night, as I was leaving, I passed her in the hallway. Her head turned a full 90 degrees to follow me. I didn't go back for 3 days. When I finally did, Grandpa was worse. He grabbed my hand and whispered, "They feed when you sleep." That night, I stayed over, sat in the visitor's chair with a blanket, watching the door. At 3:13 a.m., the door creaked open. The nurse stood there, but not alone. Behind her were others, doctors, patients, all wrong. Their faces too smooth, mouths too wide, eyes black pits. They surrounded Grandpa's bed. I tried to scream, but my voice was gone, frozen. The next morning, Grandpa was dead. The hospital said heart failure, but when I looked at the security footage, the cameras froze between 3:10 and 3:15, just static. And in the reflection of the window, not just one nurse, dozens, waiting. My college dorm had a reputation. They called it the Wailing Floor, room 606. Nobody stayed there long. The story was always the same. Crying late at night. Not loud, just soft, broken sobs from the corner of the room. I got assigned 606 my sophomore year. At first, it was fine. Weird noises, sure. Old building stuff. I joked about it with my roommate, Carter. Then the crying started. At 2:17 a.m., every night without fail. Always from the same spot, the far left corner by the desk. We thought it was the pipes, maybe a prank, until Carter saw her. He woke me up, pale, shaking, pointing. I looked, and there she was, a girl, maybe our age, sitting cross-legged, face buried in her hands, shoulders heaving with silent sobs. I turned on the lights. She vanished. We slept with the lights on after that. But she didn't stop. Some nights she moved closer. Some nights she stood at the edge of Carter's bed, just staring, crying. He left after a week, broke his lease, wouldn't talk about it. I stayed. Bad choice. The night after Carter left, I woke up to the sound of breathing. Not mine. I opened my eyes. She was there, inches from my face, eyes wide, mouth stitched shut with black thread. I bolted, moved out the next day. But no matter where I go, at exactly 2:17 a.m., I hear soft crying. And sometimes, in the corner of my room, I see her shadow. There's an abandoned amusement park 20 minutes outside of town. They say it shut down after an accident, but no one talks about what really happened. The rides still stand, rusting, rotting. Locals dare each other to spend the night there. Stupid tradition. I took the dare. Midnight, backpack, flashlight, phone for evidence. The gate was half open, creaking in the wind. Inside, the place was dead. Broken bumper cars, collapsed cotton candy stands, a Ferris wheel frozen mid-spin. I made it halfway to the carousel when I heard it. Music, not from a speaker. Old warped calliope music floating through the fog. The carousel was moving. No power, no people, just spinning, slowly. The horses looked wrong. Twisted faces, jagged teeth, empty eyes. One of them had something in its mouth, a scrap of fabric, red and stained. I should have left. Instead, I took a video. As I panned across the carousel, I caught something in the background. A man, standing perfectly still, wearing a cracked clown mask, grinning. I turned. No one there. When I checked the footage later, he was closer in every frame. By the time I ran back to the gate, the Ferris wheel had started moving too, its lights flickering. And just before I escaped, I heard laughter. Not from the speakers, from right behind me. Now every night at 3 a.m., my phone plays that same warped carousel music, even when it's turned off. There's a man who stands across the street from my apartment every night. Same coat, same hat, always facing my window. He never moves, never speaks. I've called the cops 3 times. Every time, they say there's no one there. But I see him every night, 2 a.m. on the dot. Last night, I worked up the nerve to shout at him. His head tilted, slowly, and he raised one hand. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, a photo of me, taken from across the street. We got a baby monitor when our son was born. At first, just white noise and the occasional cooing. But around 3 a.m., we started hearing a second voice, not his. A deep, raspy whisper saying, "It's not your turn." Last night, we ran in when we heard him crying. He was staring at the corner of the room, shaking his head, repeating, "Go away. You already had your turn, Dad." My uncle owned an old diner off the highway. It hadn't seen much business in years, but he kept it running out of habit. Said it gave him a reason to get up in the morning. One summer, I worked the night shift for him. Easy money, I thought. But there was a rule. If a man came in after midnight, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a black coat, I wasn't to speak to him. Just serve him a black coffee and leave the bill on the counter. I thought it was a joke. Until one night, he came. He didn't speak, didn't move much, just stared straight ahead with sunken eyes that didn't blink. I poured his coffee, left the bill, and retreated to the kitchen. When I peeked back, the coffee was untouched, but the cup was empty, the bill was gone, and there was a note where I'd left it. "Thank you. One more night bought." I never asked my uncle what it meant, and he never explained, but every night after that, I made sure the coffee was hot, just in case. Next story. At my university, there's a building no one talks about. It's technically abandoned, but lights still flicker inside sometimes. Security says it's just old wiring. But students whisper about room 413. They say if you knock 4 times, pause, then once more. The door opens. A friend of mine tried it. He thought it was funny. Knocked, just like they said. The door creaked open by itself. He stepped in and screamed. By the time campus security arrived, he was curled up in the corner, eyes wide. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't move. The doctors called it catatonia. He never came back to class. But sometimes, I see him outside the building, staring at room 413, like he's still waiting to be let in. Next story. I went camping with 2 friends last year. We found a beautiful spot deep in the forest, far from any trails or campsites. No cell service, no people, just us and the trees. The first night, everything was fine. We drank, told stories, laughed. The second night, we heard footsteps around the tent. At first, we thought it was an animal. Then we heard breathing, low, slow, like someone standing just inches away. We stayed silent. In the morning, we found symbols drawn around our tent in the dirt. Perfect circles, identical markings. None of us recognized them. We packed and left, fast. On the drive home, I opened my backpack to grab a snack. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. We were all asleep in the tent. but the photo was taken from outside. Next story. There's a road near my town people call the Stretch. It's a 10-mile highway with no turns, no exits, and no streetlights. Just trees on both sides and thick fog at night. People say if you drive it after midnight, your radio starts picking up voices. I tried it once. At mile 3, my phone shut off. At mile 5, the fog was so thick I couldn't see the lines. At mile 7, I heard static, then a whisper. It said my name. Then, "You shouldn't be here." At mile 9, a figure stepped onto the road, pale, barefoot. She raised her hand, and my car stopped without me touching the brake. She walked up to my window and whispered, "Turn back before you forget who you are." I floored it. When I hit mile 10, everything went back to normal. But for weeks, I kept hearing her voice on quiet radio stations. And every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw fog behind me. Next story. I used to love old bookstores. The smell of paper, the endless shelves, the feeling of getting lost. One day, I stumbled into a store I'd never seen before. No sign outside, just a wooden door with a bell that didn't ring. Inside, it was quiet, dusty, but warm. An old man greeted me, said I was free to look around, but warned me not to open any book with no title. I wondered. Most books had strange titles. The Clock That Watches, Rooms Without Doors, Bones in the Attic. But one shelf had dozens of blank books, no titles, no authors, just worn covers. I picked one up. It opened to the first page. June 12th. He walked in. He picked this book. He opened the cover. I froze. The next line said, "He keeps reading." Then, he turns the page. I slammed it shut and ran. When I got home, there was a blank book on my bed. The first line now reads, "He writes the ending himself." Next story. If you've made it this far, you're one of us now. Someone who listens in the dark. Someone who follows the whispers. Someone who waits for the next story, even when the fire's almost out. And maybe, just maybe, you're the kind of person these stories are written for. So if the shadows kept you company tonight, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share the darkness. Because next time, we'll go even deeper. Sleep well. And remember, they follow.